want to jump into a little bit of a deep dive into the armor systems within Diablo 4. So, Meng, take us through it.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to talk about the armor system. So in Diablo 4, armor is the major way for player to mitigate incoming damage, especially physical damage. The major way for people to acquire armor is through the 5 armor slots. There are helm, chest, pants, boots, and gloves. And mostly for fantasy reason, we made armor, chest armor, and pants provide the most armor value, while boots and gloves provide the smallest amount of armor value. The armor value on an item is depends on the item's power. And in Diablo, we use the item power value to represent the power of the item.
Yeah, and I don't think we've talked a lot about how item power works. Can you describe what it means for Diablo 4?
Yeah, so in Diablo 4, the item when they start dropping, it's based on the monster's power, and we need a value to represent how powerful this is. Like when you start getting more challenging content in the later world tier, you'll see you'll get more and more powerful item, and we need something to evaluate that, then represent that power. So we use the item power to represent that power, and you can see that on the items tooltip. And if you you can compare the two items. If one item has a higher item power, that means that item most likely going to be more powerful than the lower item power item.
But not always, right?
Not always.
There might be specific affixes or things that are especially powerful for your build.
Yeah, exactly. And back to the armor value. The armor value actually directly tied to this item power on those armor items. It's actually scaling linearly with those item power. The higher the item power, the more armor value that item provides.
And that's so that we know that we have some baseline for how much damage mitigation the player has.
Exactly. Because of this, when you loot higher power items, you naturally gain higher amount of armor. And therefore, it's guaranteed you always have a certain amount of damage mitigation against physical damage.
And so, so armor works differently in Diablo 4 than it did in Diablo 3, right?
Yeah.
In particular for elemental resistances.
Yeah, exactly. Like in Diablo 4, this is kind of like a long story. Like we because of the mechanic, we made sure the item, the player have a certain amount of damage mitigation against the physical damage. But then we found out some monster they are doing non-physical damage, and that caused trouble for the player. Like for example, there's a dungeon boss only deal shadow damage, and that caused some serious balance problem for the encounter team, because for people who have a reasonable amount of shadow resistance, that boss is not that hard. But some people, like when they have 0 shadow resistance, the boss is almost unbeatable. Like they will always get one shot for this boss.
And players at low level, they might not have access to as much shadow resistance. They might not be as familiar with the game.
Exactly. So to solve this problem, what we did is we made some changes to the armor system. So armor not only absorb or mitigate incoming physical damage, we also make it absorb a certain amount of non-physical damage. So how it works is like this. For whatever percentage the armor absorbs physical damage, it also absorbs half of that amount of non-physical damage. For example, your armor absorbs 60% physical damage. So your armor will also absorb 30% of all the non-physical damage.
So fire damage, shadow damage, and so on.
Exactly. And because of this, people now also gain some amount of, not a big amount, but some amount of mitigation against non-physical damage. So that shadow boss is still challenging for people with 0 shadow resistance, but it's in a much more controllable way.
And as players level up and they get access to higher world tiers, those world tiers actually have a penalty to your elemental resistances, right? So you're going to have to really make sure that you're keeping up on those resistances.
Yeah, exactly. When you get to higher world tier, we added more penalty for the player to make the higher world tier more challenging. And so you will have we put some 20% penalty from world tier 2 to world tier 3 for the resistance. So you gain 20% less resistance. And from world tier 3 to world tier 4, we put even higher penalty. It's 40%. So world tier 4 will be a lot more challenging than world tier 3.
But players have access, as they're getting up into those higher levels, they're also getting access to more sources of elemental resistance, right?
Yeah, exactly. We added the elemental resistance into various in-game system, like a skill tree, like item affixes, like a paragon system. You can acquire those resistance through more and more ways. We actually expose more and more ways for you to be able to acquire armor and resistance at the end game.
So I think you brought some charts to show, like in more detail, how the mitigation works.
Sure. So we have talked about like all the basic of how armor works. I want to dive a little bit deeper into actually how armor affect players' gameplay experience from level to level. The first thing I want to talk about is at each level we have a expected armor value for player, and based on that we calculate what's the damage reduction player can get at each level, and we balance the monster damage about that. And from this chart you can see at the beginning based on the expected armor value you can only get a little above 10% damage reduction, but it goes up pretty fast. And at the late game, you can get like over 40% damage reduction from the armor value. It makes sense fantasy-wise because like think about it. At the beginning, you have only this light leather pants. It absorbs a very small amount of damage. But at a later level, you get this epic plate armor that absorbs a lot more. Because of this, like the damage reduction going up, player also that means that we need to make the monster deal more and more damage to mitigate this damage reduction for the player.
Sure.
And this is next. I'm going to talk about like how actually each unit armor absorb damage from level to level.
Yeah, because I think we have another graph here that goes through the armor.
So you see, like it's opposite to how much damage reduction we expect for player to get from level to level. It's from lower to higher, but actually the damage reduction per armor is going down with level.
So per point of armor
Yes.
that I have, this is the chart that shows how much damage reduction that one single point of armor gives me at a given level. Okay.
And at the beginning, like you can see from this chart, like every 100 armor can absorb about 5% of damage reduction. But it goes down pretty fast early and slow down at the end. And at the end, you can see it like each 100 armor can only absorb 1% damage reduction. We make it work this way because we want to make sure that designer have room to add more armor bonus at the end game. We try to avoid the situation like at the beginning you get to a pretty good amount of armor, then you totally forgot about this stuff. Like early on, we talked about we added like a resistance penalty to for player from world tier to world tier. That's actually for a very similar purpose. Because of this penalty, even though you have a pretty good resistance at the early game, you still need to look for more resistance at the late game.
And there are other ways that players can get damage reduction too, in addition to armor, right?
Yeah, exactly. not only that they get this, that's kind of like happen at the late game when the challenger starts. They need to find a lot of other way, like they can look for, for sorcerer class, they can look for energy shield. For druid and barbarian, they look for fortified power, and for rogue class, they look for more dodge chance. So not only they build on the armor and resistance to mitigate the damage, at the late game, because the challenge becomes so tough, the world becomes the monster is so harsh. They need to find multiple ways to be able to survive in this harsh world. So far, I have been talking about like all of this is one player fighting the equal level monster. So next I'm gonna talk like what if you fight against a different level monster? If a monster higher than you or a monster lower than you. So this chart shows a player with 2,000 armor. What happened? How much damage reduction it actually absorb for that 2,000 armor when they fight against different level monster? And you can see like the higher the monster level is, the less damage reduction this 2,000 armor actually absorb. And you can see like at a lower level, they actually already like reach the damage reduction cap we set for armor, which is 85%. But when you like, for 2,000 armor, usually the player can acquire this amount of armor around the level 30.
Right.
But if you see this level 30 character, when they fight a level 100 monster, the 2,000 armor can actually only absorb 5% of the incoming damage, which is pretty minimum. So that means when a player, for them to challenge a higher level monster, not only the monster deal more damage, they also penetrate more of your armor.
So I'm going to need more armor as I level up.
Yeah, yep. During level up campaign, like while you're doing campaign, or you do the open world content, it's not a big issue because most of the monsters scale with you. But when you do the end game content like a Nightmare Dungeon or Helltide, a lot of time you are forced to fight higher level monster, and in those cases, you will take like this built-in punishment to for the player. So you need to like find a way to mitigate that.
Yeah.
The more damage. Some people like they build up their offensive power. They try to finish the combat faster so that they can take less damage. While other people they find all the way like we said, going through Paragon system, skill tree, item affixes, and legendary power of using all the ways to mitigate that harsh punishment.
We also added damage mitigation to monsters in Diablo 4, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I want to talk about. So we used to not have a damage mitigation for monsters. So monster used to not have armor. So however amount the damage player deals, that's however amount of damage the monster gonna take. So it has an advantage. It's pretty straightforward. It's really easy to understand. But it also has a problem that is whenever we want to increase the monster's defense power, the only way we can do it is through increasing the monster's hit point. Like we say, from level 31, a monster from level 31 to 32, we want to increase their defense power, the time to kill by 10%. That means level 32 monster gonna have 10% more hit point or life than the level 31 monster. If you do this from level 1 to level 100, and at the end it ends up with a super big number, like a billions or even trillions. And for player to be able to kill this monster in a reasonable time, the player needs to deal like billions of damage. And in Diablo 4, we show this damage number as a floating combat text. We cannot hide it. And so because the number is so big, so long, it covers a big chunk of the screen.
Yeah, it's hard to understand too. Like
Yeah.
reading, combat in Diablo is really fast. You want to be able to quickly understand how much damage you're doing.
Yeah.
And we're trying to keep the numbers down.
Yeah. We try to solve this problem. Also, we get a lot of feedback from community. They also don't like this.
I know the community has talked a lot about like big damage numbers and so forth, and like Diablo 3, for instance, and so forth. So yeah.
Yeah. So therefore, we decided to add this damage mitigation, or we call it monster armor. So at each level, monster actually absorb a certain percentage of players' damage. It's pretty low at the early level, and it goes up at a later level. Then in our playtest, it creates a different problem because this damage reduction going up pretty fast. Player actually deal less damage when they level up. That's not what we want.
I don't want to get weaker when I level up.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to take the damage reduction number for the monster so that it always scales slower compared to the damage increase. Damage increase for the player. So it's player's damage deal to the monster still increase from level to level, but now we have a pretty good way to control how fast it increases. And therefore we get the damage number at a very late game into a pretty reasonable space.
That's good.
That's
nice.
awesome.